They make the billionaire's blind 6-year-old son play piano as a joke to humiliate him in front of the whole school until a 7-year-old homeless girl does something that shocks everyone. Drop your location in the comments so we can connect with you. If this story touches your heart, like and subscribe for more. The grand hall of Westfield Academy buzzed with anticipation. Parents in designer attire sat shoulder to shoulder, phones poised to capture their prodigies. It was the annual spring showcase, where Westfield's most talented displayed their gifts. In the front row, Marcus Harrington adjusted his Italian silk tie. At 47, he'd built Harrington Enterprises into a tech empire worth billions. Today, his mind wasn't on business, but on his son, Oliver. "Are you certain this is appropriate?" Elizabeth, his ex-wife of 3 years, whispered harshly. "Oliver isn't prepared. He's only 6, for heaven's sake." "My son will learn to face challenges," Marcus replied coldly. "The world doesn't offer special treatment." Behind the curtain, Oliver Harrington stood trembling, small fingers tracing the braille watch his mother had given him last Christmas. Born blind, he'd never seen a piano, though he loved its sound. His father's assistant, Ms. Winters, had informed him just 30 minutes ago that he would perform. "Your father thinks it's time you showed some talent," she'd said, guiding him to the grand piano. "Just press some keys when they call your name." Oliver's heart hammered against his ribs. "But I don't know how to play. It's just for show, Ms." Winters replied, checking her phone. "The Harrington heir needs to participate." Principal Green's voice boomed through the speakers. "Next, we have a special impromptu performance from Oliver Harrington." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Everyone knew the Harrington boy was blind. What could he possibly perform? Oliver was led onto the stage, his white cane tapping tentatively against the polished floor. Someone snickered. Another whispered too loudly, "Is this some kind of joke?" Marcus Harrington's face remained impassive, though his eyes glinted with challenge. He'd arranged this. His son needed to understand the real world. His blindness couldn't be an excuse forever. Oliver reached the piano bench and sat down shakily. His small hands hovered over the keys, unsure where to begin. The silence grew uncomfortable. Someone coughed. Another person shifted in their seat. "Just play anything, kid," a teenage boy called out, triggering muffled laughter. Oliver pressed a key. The single note hung in the air, highlighting his inadequacy. Tears welled in his sightless eyes. Then, something unexpected happened. A small figure darted from the back of the hall. A girl in a worn jacket and mismatched shoes climbed onto the bench beside Oliver. "Hi," she whispered, her voice warm like sunshine. "I'm Melody. May I help you?" Before anyone could stop her, the girl, no more than 7 years old, took Oliver's hands in hers. "Feel my fingers," she said. "We'll play together." The audience stirred. Security moved forward, but Elizabeth gestured them back, curiosity overriding protocol. "Who is that child?" Marcus demanded. Miss Jackson, the music teacher, whispered, "I've seen her watching our practice sessions through the window. I believe she's homeless, stays with her mother in the shelter 3 blocks over." Then magic happened. Melody guided Oliver's right hand to play a simple melody, while her left hand provided chords. The notes were hesitant at first, then gained confidence. Oliver's face transformed, terror melting into wonder. Melody leaned close to his ear. "Now you try. 4 notes, like this." She played a simple pattern. Oliver repeated it perfectly. Gasps rippled through the audience. The girl nodded encouragingly, adding complimentary notes. Within minutes, they were playing a recognizable tune. Heart and soul. Oliver following her lead with uncanny precision. Marcus Harrington's controlled expression cracked. Elizabeth wiped tears. When they finished, silence hung for 3 heartbeats before the hall erupted. Standing ovation. Principal Green looked bewildered. Ms. Jackson was openly crying. As attendants rushed toward the stage, Melody whispered to Oliver, "You have music in your fingers. Don't let anyone tell you different." Then she slipped away, disappearing through a side door before security could reach her. Oliver sat alone at the piano, smiling for the first time that day. His world forever changed. No one noticed Marcus Harrington's trembling hands, or the way he stared at the exit where the little girl had vanished, a calculating gleam replacing his initial shock. 3 days after the showcase, Oliver sat at the new piano that had mysteriously appeared in his bedroom. His fingers explored the keys, searching for the magic Melody had shown him. "Play something for me," Elizabeth encouraged, sitting beside him. Since the divorce, she'd fought for more time with Oliver, but Marcus's lawyers ensured minimal disruption to the heir's routine. "I can't find the song without Melody," Oliver said softly. Elizabeth sighed. "We've looked everywhere, sweetheart. The shelter said they haven't seen her or her mother in days." What Elizabeth didn't tell her son was how Marcus had men searching the city. Not out of gratitude, she suspected, but because Marcus Harrington couldn't tolerate being upstaged, especially by a homeless child. Across town, in the basement of First Hope Church, Melody Sullivan huddled with her mother, Sarah. At 34, Sarah looked a decade older, worn down by circumstances beyond her control. "We need to move again," Sarah whispered, packing their meager belongings. "They've been asking about us at the shelter." "But why, Mom?" "I just helped a boy play piano." Sarah clutched her daughter's shoulders. "Melody, listen carefully. Rich people don't like being shown up. That boy's father, he's not looking for us to say thank you." "How do you know?" Sarah's eyes darkened with memories. "Because I worked for a man like him once." Before Melody could ask more, Father Collins entered with sandwiches. "You can stay another night, but the parish board is asking questions." "We'll be gone by morning," Sarah promised. Later that night, while her mother slept, Melody crept to the church's old upright piano. Her fingers danced silently over the keys, not pressing down, just remembering. She thought about the blind boy, how his face had lit up when he played. Her mother had taught her piano before everything fell apart, before the accident that took her father and their home. "You have a gift," her mother always said. "When you play, you light up the darkness." That's why she'd approached the blind boy. She recognized darkness when she saw it. Miles away, Oliver lay awake, replaying the showcase in his mind. Although he couldn't see, his other senses compensated brilliantly. He remembered Melody's scent, like laundry soap and apple juice. The calluses on her small fingers, how her voice smiled when she spoke. "Melody," he whispered into the darkness, a prayer and a wish. In his home office, Marcus Harrington reviewed security footage from the showcase, pausing on the girl's face. Something about her was hauntingly familiar. "Run facial recognition," he instructed his security chief. Cross-reference with employee records from the past decade. "Sir, she's just a child who made my son play piano when none of our instructors could. Find her." The next morning, Ms. Winters arrived at Oliver's room with news. "Your father has hired a piano teacher. Mr. Abernathy will start tomorrow." "I don't want a teacher," Oliver replied. "I want Melody." Ms. Winters stiffened. "Your father thinks it's best to focus on proper instruction." What she didn't mention was Marcus's new obsession. He'd barely slept, reviewing old files, making calls. The security chief had reported a potential match. Sarah Sullivan, former receptionist at Harrington Enterprises, terminated 8 years ago. At First Hope Church, Melody and Sarah slipped out before dawn. Father Collins had left them bus tickets to his sister's place in Albany, just until things cooled down, he'd said. As they boarded the bus, Melody glanced back at the city skyline. "Will I ever see Oliver again?" Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "Some people come into our lives just once, sweetheart, but that doesn't make the meeting any less important. As the bus pulled away, a black SUV turned onto the street they'd just left. Mr. Abernathy was not a patient man. 2 weeks into Oliver's lessons, the renowned pianist was already threatening to quit. "The boy has an ear," he told Marcus, "but he refuses to apply himself. He keeps playing that simplistic tune the street girl taught him." Marcus, increasingly irritated, called Oliver to his office. The 6-year-old navigated the familiar path confidently, white cane tapping lightly. "Sit," Marcus commanded. When Oliver was settled, he continued, "Mr. Abernathy says you're being difficult." "I want to play like Melody showed me," Oliver replied, his voice small but determined. Marcus controlled his frustration. "That girl knew one simple tune. Mr. Abernathy has trained prodigies who perform at Carnegie Hall." "But they don't play from their heart," Oliver insisted. "Melody said that's what matters most." Marcus fought the urge to slam his fist down. How had a homeless child gained such influence over his son in mere minutes? "Oliver," he said carefully, "Melody isn't coming back. She and her mother have left the city. It's time to focus on proper instruction." Oliver's face crumpled, but no tears came. Instead, something shifted in his expression, a hardening that disturbed Marcus. His 6-year-old suddenly seemed older. "May I go now?" Oliver asked formally. Marcus dismissed him, troubled by their exchange. Later he reviewed the latest report from his investigators. Sarah and Melody Sullivan had vanished. The Albany lead had been false. They'd switched buses. The trail had gone cold. In a small apartment in Pittsburgh, Melody practiced on a keyboard Father Collins's sister had found at a garage sale. The keys were yellowed and some stuck, but Melody played as if it were a Steinway. "You should be in school," Sarah fretted, counting their dwindling cash. "I like homeschooling with you," Melody replied, though she missed having friends. Sarah watched her daughter play, guilt gnawing at her conscience. They'd been running for nearly 3 years, first from creditors after her husband's death, then from shelter to shelter as her mental health deteriorated, making steady employment impossible. Now they were running from a billionaire. All because Melody couldn't resist helping a blind boy play piano. "Mom, do you think Oliver is still playing?" Melody asked suddenly. Sarah smiled sadly. "I hope so, sweetheart." What Sarah didn't tell her daughter was that she'd recognized Marcus Harrington at the showcase immediately. She'd worked as his executive assistant for 5 years, had known his secrets, his ruthlessness. When she'd become pregnant with Melody, he'd fired her, claiming restructuring. She'd signed an NDA for a modest settlement, which had sustained them until her husband's accident. Sarah wondered if Marcus had recognized her. Did he remember the wrongful termination suit she'd threatened before accepting the settlement? Did he know Melody was born the same year as his son? In New York, Oliver sat at his piano after Mr. Abernathy's departure. The lesson had been frustrating. Oliver could play the assigned pieces perfectly after hearing them once, but the instructor insisted on tedious scale practices. Oliver let his fingers find the keys Melody had shown him, playing their song. In just 3 weeks, he'd expanded it, adding complexity, finding harmonies that complemented the simple melody. Elizabeth watched from the doorway, recording secretly on her phone. Oliver played with an emotion that belied his age, a depth of feeling that brought tears to her eyes. When he finished, she asked, "What do you call that piece?" Oliver considered. "Finding Melody." Elizabeth sent the recording to her friend at Juilliard. The response came within hours. "This child is extraordinary. Blind or not, this is genuine talent." She debated showing Marcus, but decided against it. Her ex-husband had become obsessive about finding the Sullivan girl, though he wouldn't explain why. Elizabeth suspected it was wounded pride. The homeless child had succeeded where his expensive educators had failed. Little did she know, Marcus's fixation went deeper. Facial recognition had confirmed his suspicion. Sarah Sullivan, formerly Sarah Mitchell, had been more than his assistant. Their brief affair had ended when she'd announced her pregnancy. He'd paid her off, assuming that closed the matter. Now, watching his investigators' report, a disturbing question formed. Could Melody Sullivan be his daughter? The timing aligned. And that talent, so similar to his mother's, a concert pianist whose career ended with early-onset dementia. Marcus stared at the calendar. 8 years since Sarah left. 7 since Melody's birth. 6 since his son was born blind, a condition doctors said might have been prevented with earlier intervention during Elizabeth's difficult pregnancy, when Marcus had been distracted with other matters. "Sir?" Ms. Winters interrupted his thoughts. "The board meeting begins in 5 minutes." Marcus nodded, composing himself. He needed to find Sarah and Melody Sullivan, not just for Oliver now, but to confirm his growing suspicion. Unknown to Marcus, his investigators weren't the only ones searching. Elizabeth had hired her own team, determined to find the girl who had awakened her son's passion for music. By October, autumn painted Pittsburgh's trees in fiery colors. Melody stared through the apartment window, watching leaves spiral to the ground. They'd been here 3 months, longer than they'd stayed anywhere since fleeing New York. "Mom, can I go to real school now?" she asked, turning from the window. "Mrs. Collins says there's a good public school just 2 blocks away." Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she'd been working as a virtual assistant, a job that let her stay anonymous. "I don't know, Mel. It's risky." "But no one's looking for us anymore," Melody argued. "It's been months." Sarah didn't correct her daughter's assumption. Just last week, she'd spotted a man photographing their building. She'd called Father Collins, who confirmed Marcus Harrington's men were still asking questions in Albany. "Let me think about it," Sarah hedged. That night, after Melody was asleep, Sarah called her only remaining friend from her previous life. "They're closing in, Diane," she whispered. "I need somewhere safer." Diane, once Sarah's roommate before the Harrington years, hesitated. "I might know a place. My cousin manages apartments in Chicago, very private, cash only." "We'll take it," Sarah said immediately. "What about school for Melody?" "The girl needs stability, Sarah." Sarah glanced at her sleeping daughter. "What she needs is safety." In New York, Oliver's talent had blossomed, despite his reluctance to cooperate with formal instruction. Mr. Abernathy had quit after 6 weeks, declaring the boy impossible. 3 more instructors followed, each lasting shorter periods. Elizabeth finally intervened. "This isn't working," she told Marcus during one of their rare civil conversations. "Oliver needs a different approach." "Such as?" Marcus asked, distracted by another dead-end report from his investigators. Elizabeth played the recording of Oliver's Finding Melody composition. "Our son has created this himself." "He's composing, Marcus, not just playing." Something in the music penetrated Marcus's preoccupation. The melody was hauntingly familiar, reminiscent of his mother's compositions before illness stole her talent. "Who's been teaching him this?" he demanded. "No one. He's been exploring the piano on his own, trying to recreate what he felt when he played with Melody." For the first time in months, Marcus gave his son's development his full attention. "What do you propose?" "There's a teacher at Juilliard, Professor Grace Chen. She specializes in working with gifted children. She believes Oliver has rare potential." Marcus nodded slowly. "Arrange it." Elizabeth blinked, surprised by his easy acquiescence. "There's one condition. You stop this obsessive search for the Sullivan girl. It's unhealthy." Marcus's expression darkened. "That's not negotiable." "Why? What could possibly be so important about finding them?" Marcus nearly told her, about his suspicions regarding Melody's parentage, about the genetic predisposition for musical genius that had skipped him, but might have manifested in a daughter he never acknowledged. Instead, he deflected. The girl has a gift that could benefit Oliver. That's all. Elizabeth didn't believe him, but chose not to press. Fine, but your search stays away from Oliver. He's been through enough. In Pittsburgh, Sarah packed hurriedly. The man watching their building had approached their neighbor, asking questions about the piano girl. They needed to leave tonight. "Can I bring my keyboard?" Melody asked, sensing her mother's urgency. "It's too bulky for the bus," Sarah answered regretfully. "We'll find another in Chicago." Melody nodded bravely, though her heart ached. The keyboard had become her closest friend. As they slipped out the back entrance, Sarah failed to notice the small tracking device attached to her backpack, planted when she'd taken the trash out earlier. The device activated, sending coordinates to a server monitored by Harrington Security. In New York, Oliver met Professor Chen for the first time. Unlike previous instructors, she didn't start with scales or theory. "Play for me," she invited, sitting beside him on the bench. "Anything you wish." Oliver played Finding Melody, his fingers confident now after months of practice. When he finished, Professor Chen was silent for several moments. "That's your composition?" she finally asked. Oliver nodded. "Melody helped me start it." Instead of dismissing this mysterious melody as others had, Professor Chen asked, "What did she teach you about music?" "That it comes from here." Oliver placed a hand over his heart. "And that sometimes you have to break rules to find the right sound." Professor Chen laughed softly. "Wise friend, this Melody. Would you like to learn how to write down what you create?" Oliver's face lit up. "Can I? Even though I can't see?" "Music notation for the blind has existed for centuries. It's called Braille music. I'll teach you." For the first time since the showcase, Oliver felt a surge of genuine excitement about his lessons. That night, Marcus received an alert. The Sullivan tracker had activated. They were on the move, heading west by bus. He immediately dispatched a team to intercept them in Cleveland, their likely transfer point. Elizabeth, visiting Oliver before bedtime, noticed her son's improved mood. "You like Professor Chen?" "She's going to teach me to write my songs," Oliver said excitedly, "and she didn't laugh when I talked about Melody." Elizabeth smoothed his hair. "I'm glad, sweetheart." After Oliver fell asleep, Elizabeth checked her phone, finding a message from her private investigator. "Possible Sullivan sighting in Pittsburgh. Recently departed. Following leads." She deleted the message, conflicted. Part of her wanted to find the girl who had sparked her son's passion. Another part feared what Marcus might do if he found her first. The Greyhound station in Cleveland was crowded when Sarah and Melody arrived at 2:30 a.m. Their connecting bus to Chicago wouldn't leave until 6 a.m. "Stay close," Sarah instructed, clutching Melody's hand as they navigated toward the waiting area. Her eyes scanned constantly for men in suits, for anyone watching too intently. "I'm hungry," Melody whispered. Sarah checked their funds. The emergency cash was dwindling. "We'll get something before the bus leaves." They found seats in a corner with a clear view of all entrances. Sarah positioned their bags to create a small barrier, a habit developed over years of sleeping in public places. "Try to rest," she told Melody, who curled against her side. 3 rows away, a man in a maintenance uniform spoke quietly into his phone. "Confirmed. Woman and child matching description, gate 7. 20 minutes later, 2 men in business casual attire entered the station, scanning methodically. The taller one spotted Sarah and nodded to his partner. Sarah sensed the change immediately, a shift in the air, the weight of focused attention. She'd developed a 6th sense for danger. "Melody, wake up," she whispered urgently. "We need to move. But our bus, now, baby." Sarah grabbed their backpacks, leaving the larger duffel. "Bathroom first, then a different exit." As they stood, The men changed direction, moving to intercept them. Sarah abandoned subtlety, pulling Melody into a run toward the women's restroom. Inside, she frantically searched for options. "Mom, what's happening?" Melody asked, eyes wide with fear. "Remember our emergency plan?" Sarah replied, lifting Melody to the restroom window. "Find the nearest police officer. Tell them you're lost. Not without you." "I'll be right behind you," Sarah lied, knowing the window was too small for an adult. "Go now!" With practiced coordination born from previous escapes, Melody slipped through the window into the alley. Sarah immediately turned to face the restroom door, hearing the men outside. "She sent the kid through the window," someone reported. Sarah took a deep breath, preparing for what came next. If she could delay them, give Melody time to find help. Outside, Melody hesitated in the dark alley, torn between following her mother's instructions and staying nearby. The sound of raised voices from the restroom decided her. She ran toward the street, looking for help. As she emerged onto the sidewalk, a woman called her name. "Melody! Melody Sullivan!" Melody froze. The woman approached slowly, hands visible in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm Elizabeth Harrington, Oliver's mother." Recognition dawned in Melody's eyes. "The blind boy? Is he okay?" "He's wonderful, thanks to you. He's been composing music." Melody's face lit up briefly before fear reclaimed it. "My mum, those men—" Elizabeth assessed the situation instantly. "Get in my car, now." Inside the station, Sarah found herself cornered by Marcus's men. "Miss Sullivan, Mr. Harrington just wants to talk," the taller one said, blocking her exit. "If he wanted to talk, he wouldn't send thugs to hunt a 7-year-old, Sarah spat back. "Your daughter isn't in any danger," the second man assured her. "Mr. Harrington has questions about her. Talents." Sarah laughed bitterly. "I bet he does." Before either man could respond, local police officers entered the restroom, weapons drawn. "Everyone freeze! Hands where we can see them!" The confusion that followed allowed Sarah to slip away. Elizabeth's driver had contacted authorities, reporting attempted kidnapping. Outside, Sarah was shocked to find Melody sitting in a luxury SUV beside a woman she recognized immediately. "Elizabeth Harrington," she breathed. Elizabeth nodded. "Get in, we don't have much time." "Why would you help us?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "Because your daughter gave my son the greatest gift of his life," Elizabeth replied simply, "and because I suspect we both want to keep our children safe from Marcus's obsessions." Sarah hesitated only briefly before climbing in. As the SUV pulled away, she noticed Marcus's men emerging from the station, faces contorted with frustration. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere Marcus won't think to look," Elizabeth answered. "My family's lake house in Michigan. It's been empty for years." In the Harrington penthouse, Oliver practiced with Professor Chen, his fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence. In 3 weeks, he'd made remarkable progress with Braille music notation. "Your composition is coming along beautifully," Professor Chen commented. "Have you thought about performing it?" Oliver shook his head. "It's not finished. It needs something." "What does it need?" Oliver considered this seriously. "It needs melody." Before Professor Chen could respond, Marcus burst into the music room, agitation evident in his hurried steps. "That will be all for today, Professor," he said abruptly. After she left, Marcus paced the room while Oliver remained at the piano, head tilted in that particular way he had when listening intently. "Something's wrong," Oliver observed. "Your breathing is faster than normal." Marcus sometimes forgot how acute his son's other senses had become. "It's business, nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about melody?" Oliver asked unexpectedly. Marcus stopped pacing. "What makes you ask that?" "Your voice changes when someone mentions her. It gets tighter, like you're holding something back." Marcus stared at his son, disconcerted by his perception. "Oliver, there's something you should know. about Melody. Before he could continue, Miss Winters interrupted with an urgent call. Marcus stepped out to take it, leaving Oliver wondering what his father had been about to reveal. The call confirmed his worst fears. The Cleveland team had lost the Sullivans. Worse, security camera footage showed Elizabeth's driver at the scene. His ex-wife had interfered directly, something she'd never dared before. Marcus ended the call, fury building. Elizabeth had no idea what she was meddling with. This wasn't just about Oliver's piano lessons or Marcus's wounded pride. If his suspicions were correct, if genetic testing confirmed what timing and talent suggested, Melody Sullivan was his biological daughter, half-sister to Oliver, heir to the Harrington legacy and fortune, and Elizabeth had just helped her disappear. The lake house stood on 3 secluded acres, its windows reflecting the placid waters of Lake Michigan. Built by Elizabeth's grandfather in the 1950s, it retained a rustic charm despite modern renovations. "No one's been here since last summer," Elizabeth explained, unlocking the door. "The caretaker keeps it maintained, but he lives in town and only checks weekly." Melody ran immediately to the baby grand piano in the living room, her fingers hovering reverently over the keys. "May I?" she asked Elizabeth, who nodded permission. As Melody began to play, Sarah pulled Elizabeth aside. "Why are you really helping us?" Elizabeth watched Melody's small form at the piano, playing with a maturity that belied her 7 years. "Because I've seen what your daughter did for my son. And because I've spent enough years with Marcus to recognize when he's hiding something significant." "He's hiding quite a lot," Sarah said grimly. "About Melody?" Elizabeth asked directly. Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. "Melody doesn't know. I've never told anyone except my late husband." "Is she Marcus's daughter?" Elizabeth asked, her voice carefully neutral. Sarah's shocked expression confirmed it before she reluctantly nodded. "How did you guess?" "The timing. The way he's pursued you both with unusual determination. And watching her play—" Elizabeth gestured toward the piano where Melody's hands moved with the same fluid grace as Marcus's mother in old recordings. "The talent is unmistakable. Harrington women have been musical prodigies for generations." "I never asked him for anything," Sarah said defensively. "The settlement was for wrongful termination, not child support." "I believe you," Elizabeth assured her, "but now Marcus suspects the truth, and he won't stop until he confirms it. What does he want with her after all these years? He made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with us." Elizabeth considered this. Marcus collects assets, talent, advantages. A musical prodigy with Harrington blood. He'd see tremendous value there. "Melody isn't an asset," Sarah snapped. "She's a little girl who deserves a normal life." "I agree," Elizabeth said calmly. "That's why we're here, to figure out how to ensure that happens." At the piano, Melody finished her piece and turned to the women. "This piano needs tuning, but it's beautiful. Oliver would love it." Elizabeth smiled sadly. "I'm sure he would." "Will I see him again?" Melody asked hopefully. Before Elizabeth could answer, her phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. She declined the call, but the interruption was jarring. "He'll trace that," Sarah warned. "We should go." "Not yet," Elizabeth replied. "First, let's establish some leverage. In New York, Marcus Harrington was systematically dismantling his ex-wife's privacy. Her credit cards, phone records, property holdings, everything was being scrutinized for clues to her whereabouts. "Sir, we've located Mrs. Harrington's vehicle at O'Hare Airport," his security chief reported. "It appears she purchased 3 tickets to Seattle." Marcus smiled coldly. A diversion. Elizabeth's smarter than that. He turned to his computer, accessing a property database. Elizabeth came from old money. Her family owned real estate throughout the Midwest. The lake house had been her particular favorite, though she'd stopped mentioning it after their divorce. Check the Montgomery property on Lake Michigan, he instructed, and get the corporate jet ready. Oliver, meanwhile, sat in his room listening to the household's unusual activity. The staff whispered when they thought he couldn't hear, but his acute senses missed nothing. "Father's furious with Mother," he told Professor Chen during their afternoon lesson. "Families sometimes disagree," she replied diplomatically. "It's about Melody," Oliver insisted. "I heard Miss Winters say Mother helped her escape." Professor Chen was silent for a moment. "Oliver, sometimes adults have complicated reasons for their actions." "I want to see Melody again," Oliver said firmly. "She's the only one who didn't treat me like I was broken." Professor Chen considered her next words carefully. "Would you like to prepare a piece to play for her when you do meet again?" Oliver's face brightened. "Yes! Can we work on finding Melody? I want to make it perfect." As they began rehearsing, Oliver felt a new determination. Somehow he would find a way to reconnect with the girl who had shown him that blindness couldn't dim the music he felt inside. At the lake house, Elizabeth had formulated a plan. "We need proof of Melody's parentage," she told Sarah. "DNA testing takes time, but we can gather evidence of Marcus's pattern of behavior." "I signed an NDA," Sarah reminded her, "which becomes invalid if it was used to conceal paternity," Elizabeth countered. "My father's a federal judge. Trust me on this." While the women strategized, Melody explored the lakefront, skipping stones across the calm surface. The peaceful setting was a welcome change from months of constant movement. Sarah watched her daughter through the window, chest tight with emotion. "All I've ever wanted was to give her stability." "We'll make that happen," Elizabeth promised, "but we need to move quickly. Marcus will figure out where we are soon." As if summoned by her words, Elizabeth's phone chimed with a text from her housekeeper in New York. "Mr. H asking about Lake House. Very insistent." Elizabeth showed Sarah the message. "We have a few hours at most. Let's prepare." By sunset, they had packed essentials and moved Elizabeth's car to a neighbor's garage. Sarah had recorded her account of the affair with Marcus, his reaction to her pregnancy, and the subsequent termination and settlement. Elizabeth had contacted her father, briefly explaining the situation. The retired judge had promised legal support and was already filing preliminary paperwork for a paternity case. As darkness fell, Melody played the piano one last time before they left. The hauntingly beautiful melody carried across the lake, a soundtrack to their final preparations. None of them noticed the small drone hovering at the tree line, its camera transmitting images to Marcus Harrington's private jet, now less than 30 minutes away. "Found them," Marcus announced to his security team. "Prepare for extraction. The child is the priority." In the cabin, his gaze lingered on the drone footage of Melody at the piano. The resemblance to his mother was undeniable. The posture, the intensity, the gift that had skipped his generation but clearly lived on. Soon, he would have both musically gifted children under his control, Oliver and Melody, the blind son and the daughter he'd denied. Together, they would create the legacy his mother had envisioned before illness stole her brilliance. Marcus smiled as the jet began its descent. Elizabeth had unwittingly gathered both children in one convenient location. By morning, the Harrington family would be permanently redefined. What he couldn't see was Oliver, who had overheard enough to understand his father's intentions. While Marcus flew toward Michigan, Oliver was implementing a plan of his own, one that would change everything. The helicopter descended toward the lake house, its rotors slicing through the night air. Marcus Harrington checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. Perfect timing. Elizabeth and the Sullivans would likely be asleep, making extraction simpler. "Land in the clearing behind the property," he instructed the pilot. "Team Alpha approaches from the lakefront. Team Beta secures the perimeter." His security chief looked uncomfortable. "Sir, this could be construed as kidnapping." It's a family matter, Marcus replied coldly. Nothing more. Back in New York, Oliver sat in Professor Chen's car, his heart racing. Convincing her to help had been surprisingly easy once he'd played the voicemail he'd intercepted, his father discussing securing both children. "Are you certain about this?" Professor Chen asked, navigating through late-night traffic toward the private airfield. "My father wants to use us," Oliver replied, with unexpected maturity. "Melody and I are just assets to him." The professor had made 2 calls, one to her brother, a civil rights attorney, and another to a journalist friend who'd been investigating Marcus Harrington's business practices for years. Both were meeting them at the airfield. At the lake house, Elizabeth startled awake at the faint sound of helicopter rotors. She'd been a military brat before becoming a socialite. Some sounds triggered instant alertness. "Sarah," she whispered, shaking the other woman. "They're here. Get Melody." They had prepared for this possibility. The neighbor's son, a college student home on break, waited at the marina with his boat, if they could reach it unseen. Melody rubbed sleep from her eyes as her mother quickly dressed her. "Are we running again?" Sarah knelt before her daughter. "One last time, sweetie. After this, we stop running forever, I promise." As Marcus's team surrounded the house, something unexpected happened. Floodlights illuminated the property from multiple directions. Not his team's lights. These came from the tree line, the road, the neighboring properties. "What the hell?" Marcus demanded, as his security chief frantically checked communications. "Sir, we've got multiple news vans approaching, police cars too." Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang, a FaceTime call from an unknown number. He answered to find Oliver's face filling the screen. "Hello, Father," his son said calmly. "Oliver, where are you? What's happening?" "I'm at Teterboro with Professor Chen and some reporters," Oliver replied. "I overheard your plans for Melody and me." Marcus felt control slipping away. "Son, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Oliver interrupted. "You see us as extensions of grandmother's talent, not as children." On the screen, Marcus could see figures moving behind Oliver, people with cameras, microphones. "I've shared everything, Father, the recordings, your search for the Sullivans, your plans for a musical dynasty." Marcus felt cold dread spread through his chest. "Oliver, stop this now." "It's already done," Oliver replied. "The story breaks in 5 minutes, unless you stand down, leave the lake house, leave Melody and her mother alone." For the first time in decades, Marcus Harrington found himself utterly outmaneuvered by his 6-year-old blind son. Dawn painted Lake Michigan in gentle pinks and golds as Elizabeth sat on the dock, watching Melody skip stones across the calm surface. 3 days had passed since Marcus's thwarted operation, 3 days of cautious freedom. "How did you sleep?" Sarah asked, joining Elizabeth with coffee mugs in hand. "Better," Elizabeth admitted, accepting the steaming cup. "The nightmares are fading." The fallout from Oliver's intervention had been swift. Marcus's legal team was in damage control, negotiating terms through Elizabeth's father. The preliminary agreement included financial security for Sarah and Melody, acknowledgement of paternity, but no custody claims. "The DNA results came back," Sarah said quietly, ensuring Melody couldn't hear. 99. 8% match. He's definitely her father. Elizabeth nodded. She'd suspected as much from the moment she saw Melody play. "Does she know yet?" "Not everything, just that Oliver's father is an important man who knew me long ago. She's more interested in when she can see Oliver again." Elizabeth smiled. "They'll meet soon. The papers should be finalized tomorrow." At the Harrington penthouse, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the legal documents before him. His empire had weathered the near scandal, but his reputation within the family had crumbled. Oliver had refused to see him since returning to New York, communicating only through Professor Chen or Elizabeth. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Miss Winters entered with hesitation unusual for her confident demeanor. "Sir, Oliver is asking for you. He's in the music room." Marcus found his son at the piano, fingers moving across the keys in silent practice. The boy paused when he heard his father's footsteps. "You wanted to see me?" Marcus asked, remaining by the door. "I'm performing next week," Oliver said, "at Juilliard's Young Artist Showcase. I'd like you to attend." "Of course," Marcus replied quickly. "I wouldn't miss it." "Melody will be playing too," Oliver continued. "Professor Chen has been working with her remotely. We've prepared a duet." Marcus absorbed this information, recognizing the olive branch being extended. "Thank you for telling me." Oliver nodded once, then resumed his silent practice. Marcus watched his son for a moment longer before quietly withdrawing. Outside the music room, he leaned against the wall, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. For the first time, he saw his children not as extensions of legacy, but as individuals with extraordinary gifts, gifts he had nearly destroyed through his ambition. In Michigan, Melody practiced on the newly tuned piano, FaceTiming with Oliver and Professor Chen. "Remember, the transition comes after the third measure," Chen instructed. "Oliver will take the melody. You'll shift to harmony." Melody nodded, eyes bright with excitement. "I can't wait to play together for real." After the lesson, Oliver remained on the call while Professor Chen stepped away. "Are you nervous about meeting my father again?" he asked Melody. She considered this seriously. "A little. Mum says he's different now." "He's trying," Oliver acknowledged. "He sits outside my practice room sometimes, just listening." "Is that good?" "I think so," Oliver replied. He never listened before. The Juilliard Performance Hall hummed with anticipation. The Young Artist Showcase was always well attended, but tonight's event had generated unusual buzz. 2 Harrington children performing, one blind, one recently discovered, created irresistible intrigue. Backstage, Oliver adjusted his bow tie, fingers moving with practiced precision. Elizabeth watched proudly, resisting the urge to help. "Is Melody here yet?" Oliver asked, sensing his mother's presence. "Just arrived," Elizabeth confirmed. "Sarah is helping her get ready." Oliver nodded, outwardly calm, though his racing heart betrayed his nervousness. He hadn't seen, or rather, been with Melody since that transformative day at the school showcase 5 months ago. In the adjacent dressing room, Melody twirled in her blue dress, the full skirt billowing around her knees. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, arranging her daughter's hair one last time. "Do you think Oliver will like my dress?" Melody asked. Sarah smiled at the innocent question. "I think he'll love how you play. That's what matters most to him." A gentle knock announced Professor Chen. "5 minutes, Melody. Oliver is ready when you are." The 2 children met in the wings, standing silently for a moment before Melody reached for Oliver's hand. "Hi," she said simply. Oliver smiled, tension melting away at her touch. "Hi, are you ready?" "I've been practicing every day," she assured him. "Me too. I finished our song." Before Melody could respond, the stage manager signaled their entrance. The audience applauded as Professor Chen led them to the grand piano, a single bench awaiting them. In the front row, Marcus Harrington sat rigidly beside Elizabeth and Sarah. The 3 adults maintained careful civility, bound by legal agreements and their shared concern for the children. As Oliver and Melody settled at the piano, Marcus found himself holding his breath. He hadn't heard them play together since that first unexpected duet. Despite extensive therapy and reflection over recent months, he still struggled to separate his ambitions from his children's happiness. The hall fell silent as 4 small hands poised above the keys. Then, magic happened. The piece began softly. Oliver's composition had matured under Professor Chen's guidance. The melody they played together at the school showcase remained the foundation, but now intricate harmonies and counterpoints enriched it. Without sheet music, without visual cues, the children communicated through subtle shifts in tempo and pressure. They breathed together, creating music that spoke of separation, longing, and reunion. In the audience, hardened critics wiped away tears. Elizabeth reached for Sarah's hand, both mothers overwhelmed by their children's connection. Marcus Harrington sat motionless, a single tear tracking down his face as he finally understood what his mother had tried to tell him decades ago. Music wasn't a skill to be harnessed or exploited. It was a language of the soul. 1 year later, the Harrington Music Foundation celebrated its grand opening. The converted warehouse in downtown Manhattan now housed practice rooms, performance spaces and classrooms, all designed to be accessible to children of all abilities and economic backgrounds. Oliver, now 7, and Melody, 8, cut the ribbon together, their synchronized motions practiced and precise, much like their piano playing. "I declare the Harrington Music Foundation officially open," they announced in unison, triggering applause from the gathered crowd. Marcus stood to the side, observing with quiet satisfaction. The foundation had been his idea, a genuine attempt at atonement and a way to channel his organizational talents towards something meaningful. Sarah approached hesitantly, still uncomfortable in his presence, despite their carefully negotiated co-parenting arrangement. "The children did wonderfully." Marcus nodded. "They always do." "Melody's been asking about living arrangements for the fall semester," Sarah continued. "The Juilliard prep program is 3 days a week." "The foundation apartment is ready whenever you decide," Marcus replied. "No pressure. Connecticut isn't that far by train." Their conversation, though civil, remained stilted. Too much history lay between them, but both had committed to maintaining peace for their daughter's sake. Elizabeth joined them, breaking the tension. "The reporters want photos of the children with both families. Are we ready for that?" The 3 adults exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come since the confrontation at the lake house. "I think we can manage," Marcus said finally. As the makeshift family posed for photographs, Marcus, Elizabeth, and Oliver on one side, Sarah and Melody on the other, Professor Chen watched from nearby, marveling at how music had forced healing where nothing else could. Later that evening, the adults sat in Marcus's penthouse living room while the children practiced in the music room. Their duets had gained national attention, with performances scheduled at major venues for the coming season. "They need normal childhoods too," Sarah reminded everyone. "School, friends, playtime." "Agreed," Elizabeth said firmly. "The foundation can wait until after school hours and weekends." Marcus, once the driven taskmaster, now nodded without argument. Professor Chen has already adjusted their schedule to prioritize regular academic work. The conversation continued, 3 adults navigating the complex co-parenting of 2 exceptional children. None of them noticed Oliver and Melody listening from the hallway, hands clasped in silent solidarity. "Do you think they'll ever really get along?" Melody whispered. Oliver tilted his head, his unique way of processing the world. "They're trying. For us. Is that enough?" Oliver considered this with the thoughtfulness that had always seemed beyond his years. "It's a beginning, like our first duet." Melody smiled, remembering that day, how scared he had looked, how naturally their hands had found harmony together. "Come on," she said, tugging him toward the piano. "Let's practice our new piece. They'll hear it and remember why we're a family." As the first notes drifted from the music room, the adults fell silent, their differences temporarily forgotten as the children's melody wove them together once more. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and Carnegie Hall tickets. Oliver and Melody's first major concert, The Unseen Melody, had sold out within hours of announcement. In the Harrington penthouse, final preparations were underway. Elizabeth supervised Oliver's formal wear fitting while Marcus reviewed security arrangements. "The car will take us through the artist's entrance," Marcus explained, pointing to the building schematics. "No press allowed backstage." Elizabeth nodded approval. The children's rising fame had brought unwanted attention, speculation about the billionaire's secret daughter, and the blind prodigy filled tabloids. Both parents were determined to shield them from media circus. Across town, in the foundation apartment Sarah and Melody now occupied during school weeks, another preparation scene unfolded. "Hold still," Sarah murmured, securing crystal hairpins in Melody's elaborate updo. "Just 3 more. Mom, what if I mess up?" Melody asked suddenly, vulnerability breaking through her usual confidence. Sarah met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. "Then you'll keep playing. That's what musicians do." "Oliver never messes up," Melody said softly. "Because he practices 8 hours daily," Sarah reminded her. "And because music is how he sees the world." Melody considered this. Over the past year, she'd witnessed Oliver's relationship with music evolve from gift to identity. While she played beautifully, he lived within the notes. The concert itself passed in a blur of lights, applause, and flawless performance. The children played their original compositions, classical pieces, and concluded with the expanded version of Finding Melody, the duet that had started everything. Standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Music critics struggled to find adequate words for what they'd witnessed. How could children so young convey such emotional depth? At the private reception afterward, a famous composer approached Marcus. "Your children have extraordinary talent. With proper guidance, they could revolutionize contemporary classical music." Marcus smiled politely. "They're not my children, in the possessive sense. They're their own people with their own gifts." The composer looked taken aback by this unexpectedly humble response from the notorious businessman. Later that night, when the excitement had faded and the children were asleep, Oliver in his room, Melody in the guest suite she used for concert weekends, the 3 parents gathered on the penthouse terrace. 1 year, Elizabeth mused, gazing at the city lights. Hard to believe how much has changed. Sarah nodded. From homeless to Carnegie Hall, Melody still doesn't quite understand the magnitude. "Neither does Oliver," Marcus added. "That's their magic. They play for the joy, not the acclaim." The adults fell into companionable silence, their complicated relationship finding equilibrium in shared pride and purpose. Below them, New York continued its endless rhythm, unaware that 2 children sleeping in adjacent rooms had touched something eternal through their music, and in doing so had healed a broken family. 5 years later, Oliver and Melody sat side by side on a park bench, enjoying rare private time away from concerts, interviews, and academy classes. At 12 and 13, they were navigating the tricky waters of early adolescence alongside their musical careers. "Cambridge or Juilliard?" Melody asked, referencing their ongoing debate about future education. Oliver shrugged. "We have years before deciding." "Dad, Marcus, keeps leaving brochures for the Royal Academy," Melody said, still occasionally stumbling over what to call her biological father. "Mum favors Curtis Institute," Oliver added. "Only Professor Chen doesn't seem to have an opinion." "Because she knows we'll decide for ourselves," Melody concluded. Their relationship had evolved into something beyond friendship or even siblinghood, a connection forged through music that transcended conventional bonds. They could communicate without words, anticipate each other's needs, and challenge each other's growth. The Harrington Music Foundation had expanded to 3 locations nationwide, providing education to thousands of children regardless of ability or background. Oliver and Melody remained its heart and inspiration, though they now shared spotlight with other young musicians discovered through the foundation's outreach programs. Their family structure had settled into functional, if unconventional, stability. Sarah directed the foundation's educational programs. Elizabeth managed the children's increasingly demanding performance schedule. Marcus handled business operations and financial matters. The three adults maintained separate residences, but coordinated seamlessly around the children's needs. What had begun as forced cooperation had transformed into genuine respect, occasional friendship, and shared purpose. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that day?" Oliver asked suddenly. Melody considered the question. "I'd still be running with Mom, probably. You'd still be taking lessons you hated." "No, I might never have found music," Oliver said softly. "Not really." "You would have," Melody assured him. "It was already in you." Oliver shook his head. "But I needed you to show me how to find it." Melody bumped his shoulder affectionately. "And I needed you to show me how to share it." As they walked back toward the waiting car, Oliver's cane tapping lightly beside Melody's steady footsteps, neither child noticed the man watching them from across the park, the school administrator who had arranged that fateful impromptu performance years ago, the one who had whispered to Marcus Harrington that embarrassing his blind son might build character. The man had been fired shortly after the incident, his career in education effectively ended. Now he observed the famous young musicians with complex emotions, regret for his cruelty, amazement at its unintended consequences. He considered approaching, offering long overdue apologies, but stopped himself. Some stories didn't need additional characters or forced resolutions. Some melodies were complete as written. As Oliver and Melody slipped into the car, laughing at some private joke, their futures stretched before them, bright with possibility, harmony, and the music they would continue creating together. The melody that began with a moment of cruelty, transformed by kindness, had grown into a symphony of connection, family, and purpose that would resonate far beyond the lives of those who first played it. Sometimes the most beautiful music emerges from unlikely beginnings. A blind boy finding courage, a homeless girl offering kindness, and the unseen melody that united them forever.